I remember working at CNN, we'd have like in the last hour of the show, we're putting those in for the top of the show, or we're putting in little graphics, and those are things you just gotta zone in and do it.
Yeah.
So the first advice I was given was ask people for help, but don't ask people for help right when show's about to start, which is
No,
exactly right.
especially as an
Exactly.
intern. Like
Yeah.
especially as an intern, you learn that the hard way because people want to help you, but it's sometimes like hard to help people. Like no matter the station, like everyone has like a role, and time is not always your friend. I've started a few podcasts before. I did one in high school about my sports takes. Did one last year that I didn't really follow through with. I just talked to a few friends, published one or two. But I'm hoping, and time will tell, that this is a little different and I can actually stick with it. I feel like I have more of an angle and more of a purpose doing this. I'm still not good at this, like the structured part of the podcast stuff, but hopefully I get better with it with time and the more times I practice. But the first conversation I had was with Jonas Blum, someone I've known for 12 years now. We went to middle school, elementary school, and high school together. And he's a journalism student like I am, and he wants to be a reporter one day. And it was really cool to hear about his experiences. So I was able to kind of dig into why he wants to go into journalism and where that passion kind of comes from. I feel like with how ever changing the media sphere is, the purpose of why people want to do things can constantly change and be just different from the next person because there's so many different opportunities now than there have been ever. And to just kind of hear about Jonas's experiences in college, how he's networked, his time interning at CNN last summer, kind of help paint a better picture of why he wants to do this, and more importantly, understand what it's like to want to go into media because it's something a lot of people want to do. We all want to have our voice out there in some way, some form, and to manifest that in however way you see best fit. I think is the skill. It's the name of the game. And it was just a really great conversation. And I hope whoever's watching, enjoys the next 30 minutes of hearing me and Jonas talk. My first question is for you is like, how do you manage your ego? Uh, for the fact that you've been around people who are much more qualified, more experienced media people, and then also people who you feel like you're above and rightfully feel that. How do you kind of balance that?
I think you just really gotta stay focused. I try to stay focused on myself and what I can do, instead of really looking at comparing it to others, because this industry is huge, but this industry is also competitive, but also everyone has the same goal. So if you are constantly trying to like look at who's better than you, who's worse than you, you're gonna get demoralized right quick, and you're risking like alienating people that can help you. And the only person to really compare yourself to is yourself. Look back at your old reels, look back at your old stories, and see what you could have done better, see what you have done better. I still cringe looking at some of my early stories because they're so bad. But I learned a lot since then, and that's what I like to use as the bar rather than someone else's work.
Isn't though there like kind of like a level of like comfort though watching your early stuff? Like for me, whether it's like my tie not being on properly or not understanding how to properly nod as you're about to be your IFB is telling you look live and you're like how do you kind of balance that for you?
I mean, there's a charm to it, that's for sure. That being said, you don't like want to have mistakes. The goal is to be
No.
as close to perfect as possible. Not that you're ever going to be perfect.
Yeah.
So really, it's a balancing act. But yeah, I don't think I'm gonna not cringe at my old stuff until it's so far in the past that I can laugh. Um,
Why do you want to do this? Because I feel like, one question I ask almost anyone that I network with is like, what are you going to be doing in 10 to 15 years? And honestly, a lot of them don't give an answer, not as a cop out, but because they've been in the trenches of media for so long. And whether they're MMJing, producing, creating social media content where it's like the social sphere of like the media sphere of what it was in high school, like when we were in high school versus now is so different. Like, how do you kind of manage your future goals almost?
Media is fast moving, and that's very true. And we don't know what the primary method people are going to consume their news will be in 5 years, probably not even in 3 years. That being said, I think the one constant throughout US history, but also world history, is that the media sticks around in some way or another. And so I'm young enough, I'm like adaptable enough that I can adjust with how things are going. And I'm happy to ride the wave. The cause of journalism, the goal to serve the public, to serve the public interest, to help the American voter or worldwide, just to help the viewer or consumer, that's what motivates me throughout. It's not whether this medium or this medium is going to make it. Journalism will survive in some form or another, and it needs people to be dedicated to it, and I'm there for that. So it's idealistic. I realize it's probably a little too optimistic, but I'm here for the long run, so we'll see how it goes.
I feel like there has to be some element of like being a sicko that is involved in this because it's like, well, there's a good chance you're making $38,000 in your first market and MMJing, possibly doing 2 packages a day all alone, maybe having to do your own live shots, which is beyond dangerous. And people still want to do it. So there has to be like a level of sicko that comes with everything.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't have signed up for the. It's not like this industry hides its lack of glamour. You don't
Yeah.
sign up unless you want to do it. I'm a type of person who's if I'm doing something, I'm going 100%. I'm going 110%. It doesn't matter. There's no like half-assing it for me. I'm going. And so in this case, it's I love journalism. I really enjoy what I'm doing. I'll roll with the punches when it comes to salary and free time and social life and
and
travel.
and everything. Um, like for me, I was an idiot. So as a comms major, my grades don't matter as other industries may. Well, like I'm not an engineer, so my version of finals for me was I decided I was going to do 2 stories in 2 days,
Nice.
and that required me to do the chunk of both of those stories on the same day. One of them, the whole story on the same day, because it was a live shot with very limited VO, and then the other one was like a holiday trees package, and it was for like our show, our Saturday morning show, Juice and Java. So it's kind of like the Today Show, and it was like our like hour-long show or
Good
whatever.
name.
So try to have some fun with it. Um, I like to call that state of busyness in media as like news brain, right? If I'm live at 6:15 for our show, the show starts at 6, and I'm like, I'm in B or C block, and it's like 4:30. Like I call it news brain because it feels like I don't have that much time. How do you kind of manage that like chaotic feel of like you got to get somewhere at least 45 minutes before, deal with all the like how do you kind of balance that all?
Honestly, asking me while I'm not in that mode is kind of hard, but when you're in like this zone, just everything's kind of moving in slow motion, you can figure stuff out. I remember this summer where I was interning at CNN over the summer down in Atlanta, and we had a show that was going for 3 hours. We had 1 to 4 every single day. And so the day would feel very slow in the morning, and the second you get to showtime, everything's just going, and you need to have everything lined up. And like there's times where you're just like, I have to sprint upstairs to the newsroom to get something, and it's gonna make it on air 3 seconds later. Or a specific answer is right when President Joe Biden had dropped out of the race for president and Harris was just announced as his successor. Um, I was the intern dedicated to listening to the JD Vance speech given the next day. And the second he started talking about Harris, I needed to tell the EP to cut to it live on CNN domestic and I think international at that point. Um, and I did, but I had to pause everything else I'm doing to listen to the speech in one ear, but really couldn't not monitor the other stuff because I did have other responsibilities. And so in those moments, you just lock in. Like it's just, I, I think there's like a social science definition of flow state in like the psychological field. You're just there. I don't really know how to explain how it works. Um, but it's a mind space you get in, and I think you hone it over time. You get better at it over time. Obviously, practice makes perfect. For student broadcast, I've had similar experiences as well. We did a few special reports when, unfortunately, there was a school shooting south of our campus, and so we went on air for like a long time, almost immediately once we could safely get to the studio. Um, and for those moments, you just like time ceases to exist in a way. It
Yeah.
moves really fast and really slow.
Well, yeah, that's why it's like even if your show starts at 5 and it's 3:45, you feel like you don't have that much time because you just know it's not just about what needs to be done, it's what could go wrong. Is your IFB gonna work? Like is
Yeah.
someone gonna forget a camera or something? Like it's just whether you're on you're in market 7 or you're at your student TV station, like all this stuff can always happen.
And then the exact opposite happens as you get closer to show. So 3:45 for a 5 o'clock show, you feel like there's no time.
Yeah.
4:57 to 5 o'clock is the slowest 3 minutes you will ever experience sitting there waiting.
Well, I think it's because like at a certain point, like in my classes we do practice live shots, and I don't practice right before I'm gonna go. Like, we all do our practice live shots, like wrapping around a few sots and some VO, and like there's just a certain point where you can't do anything else, right? It's kind of like studying 7 minutes before the test. Like it's like everything you're gonna do, like how you're gonna perform is how you're gonna perform. Now maybe like if you find out a new detail in 6 minutes, that's totally different. But practicing, this just in outside of the schoolyard, there was a robbery or like something like that. Like there's a certain point where it's done.
And even the viewer doesn't want that highly rehearsed live shot. They want it to
No.
sound good, but they want you to sound like you're telling the story to, in this case, the anchor and then the audience. So if you are hard studying the exact words you wrote down before, you're gonna look more nervous than you probably actually are out there.
Yeah.
And speaking, human beings speak with ums and pauses. And while you're not supposed to like accent them, you don't want lots of ums in your phrasing, they come out. And it's better to use them to your advantage and accept that you're going to be human than drill in a really challenging script you've written for yourself for a live shot that might not actually sound that great once you're on air.
So that makes me think, are you more of a bullet point guy or do you write it out?
I'm a bullet point guy.
Okay,
I
yeah. I
might,
feel like
I
you have to be.
may think of a phrase or two if I can think of a pun, if it's a more lighthearted story, or if there's something I really need to hit on, I can use that. But generally, I go for few bullet points, and then I'm gonna hit these in sentences, and it's not a problem to just weave some words around it. I can talk off the cuff.
Yeah, well, it's also just like it's not always about what you learn on that day about the story. It's just what your overall background knowledge is on said topic, I've realized. So for me, like if I'm doing like a live shot like on my phone, like that I'm gonna post on Twitter before a game, I don't try to rehearse it. I have some bullet points, but what's what's helping me a lot is the fact that I've been following sports since I was 9 years old. Not just the fact that like I know everything going on for the game that's about to start. So I think being able to go off the cuff is more a reflection of how much you know about said topic before the day.
Relying on your experience is gonna make that's why everything gets easier as you go further along in your career. You have so much of a back catalog to work with of thoughts and phrases and things you've studied that it makes it easier. That's why a live shot as a senior in college or a junior in college is a lot easier than a live shot as a freshman in
Well, there's
college.
just more connective tissue.
You,
There's just
you
more connective tissue to everything that you've done.
it's a muscle. You practice makes perfect. It's a muscle.
What do you find to be kind of like the hardest part of this industry?
So there's two different things I look at as challenging parts of this industry. On one end, in the actual doing the job part, when you're new to a market as an MMJ or as a reporter with the photog, and you've never lived there before, finding stories off the bat when you just move somewhere is challenging beyond belief. Like you scour Facebook, you scour Nextdoor, you dig around. You'll eventually set up roots, and certain people will know you and reach out to you, and it gets easier. But building a beat when you first get to a new place is always going to be a challenge. And so that's more of the practice part of the job that's challenging. Over on the more meta of the job, this is an industry that doesn't pay well, is constantly shrinking yet constantly hiring, and it's very competitive, even though very few people seem to want to go into it. And so it's all these like, it almost seems like they're ironic things, but not ironic. The word is
Paradoxical?
paradoxical is a good word. I whatever. It's
You're the
all these
Northwestern kid.
I know. Oxymoronic. That's it.
Okay.
It's all these oxymoronic things that make it so looking for a job in this industry, especially as an intern, even as an MMJ, is a challenge if you want to go to any place where you're going to be doing work you enjoy doing. I know that I could probably get a job at Market 160, but do I want to get a first job at Market 160? It's a little far out. Whereas trying to get something higher up is going to be a challenge because there's not many jobs for a lot of people and the pay's not great and it's just messy. So the solution is just keep going, keep trying, keep fighting per se, but it's not like a pleasant experience.
It's definitely like a begin again industry. And I think that is good and bad, right? Like I always find it fascinating that like, people in engineering or in business, like you've got these long projects, and unless you're Ken Burns or you're Woodward, and you got like 17 days to do something or whatever, 17 months. Every day is begin again, especially as an MMJ. Begin again, begin again, begin again, and that is, I feel like mentally taxing, but it's always like, okay, I can have a great day, and also I can have a bad day, and it's just about making air, not art. Like that, they say that to me at school all the time.
That's actually a really good phrase, but it's exactly right. When you get into the station at say 9 in the morning, if we're talking for an MMA job for the evening, you need a bow shot at 4, a live shot at 5, and a package at 6, and you just need to do it. And it doesn't matter if it's the perfect package because no one's going to go back tomorrow and watch that package unless it's a great package. So as long as you did it well enough that no one's going, this feels wrong, you did a good job. And you got to be able to use what you learned there to make your next package better the next day, but you don't need to dwell on the mistakes because you're going to make mistakes. It's a quick industry, it's a fast industry. You have to keep moving.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a double-edged sword in a lot of ways.
Yes, you'll trip yourself up if you're worrying about everything you say. If you start thinking about what you're saying while you're saying it and then questioning whether you should have said that rather, you'll trip up on your words just like I did.
Yeah, so it's a great example. I think so I interned at Fox 5 DC this past summer, and then I've done some work for SB Nation covering games, and so for me, like this summer, I'm always thinking to myself like, hey, I want to go national. I want to go national. I want to go national. Just because I've had that smaller market experience, like covering news at school, I had that big market experience, and then now I want to go national. Whether I'm doing stuff for like a food media company or I applied to intern at CNN and so on and so forth, like I want to go national. But honestly, a lot of my friends who, whether they're covering news in like a small market or are covering, a baseball team in Cape Cod or in Cedar Rapids, Iowa or whatever, they also get that great experience too because they get reps on a side of reps. We get a lot of times being on the national or larger stage, you get the networking with the side of networking. You don't get as many reps. So like, how have you kind of navigated that with your career and like what's the balance? Because I feel like it's very naive, and you would know this. Like, it's very naive to look at someone and be like, "Oh, they're interning at a small market, like they're behind." Like, there's a lot of value to just.
No, you're exactly right. So I have friends that are market interning at smaller stations, and obviously this coming quarter, I'm going to be interning at WWSB. I'm going to be MMJing, actually, more accurately, and that's a small station in Sarasota, Florida, which is not a very large market, serves 2 counties, and that experience is going to help me build my reel, help me make sources, learn to get inroads into a new city and new reporting skills. And then I can pair that with what I did last summer working on a nationally televised show on CNN that regularly wins in its ratings category, where I got to write scripts and edit things and put video together. It all comes together. And so there's value of both types of experiences. And there's definitely not less value in doing a small market because in a small market, you're given more responsibility quickly. You need those skills. So it's a balancing act. You're really working together with small market skills, big market mentality, or national mentality. Put it together, and you have a good journalist, and you have a good career ahead of you.
Yeah, and then also in a lot of ways, it builds that like seasoning, right? Like you're gonna be able to go in to Sarasota and learn what it's like in a small community, which means that it's easier but also harder to crack into it for people to feel comfortable around you, and just have to have to adapt.
Indeed, someone's a food journalist, I can tell, saying build that seasoning.
Uh,
But that is exactly right. It's I think of it like the roots of a tree. You're spreading your roots in a new place. You're meeting new people, learning new people, and developing your journalistic skills. And it's a learning experience, but also public service. You're doing something the public needs. And so it's very rewarding in that way, even if, pay can be less than rewarding.
Yeah. Well, to start, I hate this narrative that like, oh, there's no money in media. There's a ton of money in media. You just have to be unique, and that's hard. But there's a ton of money in media. I just like it
Yeah,
doesn't.
no.
It's like these
You
little
can do well
cesspools
in
that
media.
expand. Like what? So for me, like my biggest worry, I would say like the thing that wraps me up in my career the most is like how can I maximize who I am as a person and make that reflective in front of the camera. That kind of is the thing that stresses me out the most. I wouldn't say it's necessarily my weakness because I'm trying and doing whatever I can to foster that skill and work at it. But like what kind of is your, I guess, your worry, or like what keeps you up at night in the sense of like your career future?
That I'm not going to make it. But what I've noticed in the industry is that if you stick with it, you'll find a job. There is a job and there's a comfortable job and there's a job you enjoy. And so, yeah, I worry about not getting a job, but it's more the first job. You got to get your foot in the door. It's a constant battle to get your foot in the door. But once you are finally in there and you can prove yourself in your niche, you can build out from there and expand. And there truly is a ton of opportunity in this industry. We see anchors and reporters turn over all the time, and that means that new people are getting their shot all the time. That combined with I have a friend that was the intern that made the TikToks for Jake Tapper. And so like there's all these new ways to interact with the audience and interact with media that is developing over time.
Do you think because it's ever changing, you kind of get imposter syndrome, or you don't feel that way?
I think you can't help but get imposter syndrome, but
Yeah.
if you dwell on it, you'll get stuck. And there's no reason to dwell on stuff like that. I can't help but do it sometimes, but it's not beneficial.
And also a lot of times, like, it's very visible to the viewer. I think in a lot of ways when it comes to like your mannerisms and your how your body moves and your gesticulations, like I actually think the audience can comprehend it and see it. Right? Like I think there's a difference. So one of my favorite reporters ever, Adrian Wojnarowski, he was horrible, horrible on TV. He would stutter all the time. But in a way, he was good because he sounded like a news reporter, like he was delivering information to people. So there's he didn't feel like an imposter because he had the information no one else had. I think there just has to be a level of just like if you're gonna be up there, you just gotta let it rip. I
And
love
if
the
we're
bear,
going to
so
talk about Woj, you do have to admit that he chose to leave the industry because he didn't feel that it was supporting him and he thought it was a little unkind. Like there was a part
yeah,
of why he left that was down to that. So you have to be willing to balance both being really good at your job, but maybe not always getting the flowers you deserve.
yeah. I want to go back to what we were talking about with like Newsbrain. So for me, like I know a lot of people when they're like 45 minutes to show, like they'll be like, "Don't talk to me." Like I need to be in my own lane, and it's not in a mean way. It's just like, "Hey, I'm focused. I'm in my tunnel." Like, how do you kind of get like 45 minutes before your live shot or 45 minutes before? Like, I just feel very reachable because I believe I can't change much about myself in 45 minutes to get me ready. Like whatever I am is going to be in 45 minutes is what I'm going to be, unless it's like new information. How do you kind of feel in those spots?
I'm a little closer to you on that. I like the idea of, especially before a live shot, staying a little more loose. So I'll crack a joke, I'll talk to
Yeah,
people. But if I'm trying to like study some facts I want to hit when I'm in my live shot, it's just a matter of like tuning out the noise. And, sometimes that literally is putting in headphones, but other times it's just a matter of, I don't know, just quieting the world around you and you just need to focus on what you're doing. I remember working at CNN, we'd have like in the last hour to show, we're putting those in for the top of the show or we're putting in little graphics. And those are things you just gotta zone in and do it.
yeah.
So the first advice I was given was ask people for help, but don't ask people for help right when show's about to start, which is
No,
exactly right.
especially as an
Exactly.
intern. Like especially as an intern, you learn that the hard way because people want to help you, but it's sometimes like hard to help people. Like no matter the station, like everyone has like a role, and time is not always your friend. Like like you said, like it can be 4:57 for a 5 o'clock show. You can feel like all the time in the world, but a lot of times it can be 3:27 for a 7 o'clock show, and you'd be like, oh my god, I don't have enough time. So
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
it's like a weird conundrum. What would you say is the coolest experience you've had so far?
So as I said before, I working at CNN this summer. We hosted the Biden-Trump debate, what turned out to be the only debate between those two gentlemen of this election cycle. And in the lead up to that, I was involved in the planning. I was involved in not the planning, but the preparation, more say. And me, a person named Jaden, who was also an intern, we got to sub in for Trump and Biden in a practice debate in order to test lighting, to test sound, a few other things. And it's really cool that I got that experience. I got to stand on the stage. I like made a comment about how the floor was a little like not deep enough so you could theoretically fall backwards, and they fixed that for the actual show. And so it was a great experience. I got to practice speaking off the cuff, and I got to be a part of history in a way that I haven't had before. So I think that was probably the most like fun experience. The actual night of the debate was also a fascinating time. I was in the spin room where all the media from all the different publications was, and I was leading people around. And so, like with 3 minutes warning, I'd be told, go grab David Chalian and run him through the basement of this building to the stage. And for context, the spin room was in McCamish Pavilion, which is where Georgia Tech plays basketball. And so it's navigating through an arena with little time and Secret Service everywhere. It was such a great experience. And you got to know a lot of people, got to talk to a lot of people, and got to contribute to something that is great for the world and really beneficial.
Did uh did you have any mess ups at CNN that like sunk your stomach? Did you mess up any time and you're like, ugh, and then you mess
Everyone makes mistakes. Sometimes you say a joke that didn't land. Sometimes you write a little bit of Vogue that has a tiny error. I remember the first error that I got called on. Now, I don't remember every error, but this one I do because it was the first one I got called on. I mixed up the nicknames for Florida and for Hawaii. So I called Hawaii the Sunshine State, even though it's the Aloha State. And I got called on it, and I was told just don't use those nicknames. And I remember being like, "Ooh, that's not great." But also, he's giving me advice and telling me to fix it. It's not a big
Yeah.
deal. It didn't make air, which was great. So I think that's probably the best, like the most like surprising error that like resonated with me, even though it's a tiny thing. Like no one would have noticed. The
Yeah.
graphics said the right state.
Yeah. I would say like when it comes to feedback, there are some most people are here to help you. Most
Mhm.
people are here to help you. I would say like I feel like when it comes to student television, people are harsher. I don't know if you had the same experience, but for me, I feel like student television, like, at Citrus TV, like I think people in a lot of ways are like a little harsher. I think on the higher levels where it's been like at Fox 5 DC, like no one was ever mad at interns for messing up because I think they know and they've all done it so many times.
Yeah, I think maybe there's a little bit of that. I think Citrus TV is a little more established than the Northwestern News Network, so we're a little more gung ho and everyone's just kind of in it to win it.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot more of a camaraderie situation. But I found that yes, working at the network level, everyone's there to help. Like there are a few people that probably didn't like my humor or something like that, or didn't quite enjoy the idea that an intern was talking so much. But generally, it was very welcoming, very inviting. People wanted to work with you. I still keep in touch with the EP and senior EP for that show. It was a great place to work. And so I found that it's a more supportive industry than it looks like on the outside.
Yeah. Um, and like kind of speaking of that, like being in New York City right now, I've networked with so many people, not just broadcasters. Because I mean, the goal for me is to have my own show one day, podcast esque. But I would definitely say something I've learned from just networking is people are just very nice and like they want to help you. And there's a lot of sympathy that goes into this industry because it's so everlasting.
Yeah.
What have you kind of learned from your networking and how do you kind of approach it? Because I don't know. It is harped to me so much every day. And I just like talking to people, so it's not a big deal for me. But like, how do you kind of manage it?
One, it does help to like to talk to people. That is
Yeah.
just being willing to talk to random people,
Yeah.
100% a win. That being said, I think it's a game of you reap what you sow. If you talk to someone once and get their email maybe, but then don't follow up, you're not getting anything from it. You have to
Nothing.
talk to them and talk to them again and send them an email and show them your latest work and maybe even offer to go to lunch with them. It's work. It's an actual job of networking with people, but it can be great. Again, the connections I've made, especially through this summer, but also I was in DC in the fall reporting on the Hill, and I just got to know the other reporters so much so that I'm applying to a job that at the company some of them work at. And so it was an experience that I wouldn't take back, but I only got to use that, getting to know them because I talked to them and kept talking to them and didn't just like hang in the corner and hide.
Speaking of like applying to networks and stuff like that, I've had more success with some national networks applying than other ones, and it just sometimes confuses me because like I sometimes know I'm more qualified than the people I see on LinkedIn getting certain jobs, and maybe I'm not. Maybe that's just the big ego that comes with media. How do you kind of manage like in your own experiences like, well, this company says this, but I just did that. Like, how do you kind of manage that for yourself?
Getting rejected sucks. It's not going to get easier. Getting rejected is never fun. That being said, if you only focus on the rejections, you're never going to get accepted anywhere.
Yeah.
And so you just keep going, you keep chugging. I mean, the application processes for these different networks tend to not line up exactly. So theoretically, like sort of when NBC's already done filling, CNN's internship applications haven't even closed yet.
Yeah.
So it's just a constant going. And Fox seems to be open forever for no clear reason.
Yeah.
So it's you just have to keep digging, keep emailing, networking, hoping.
What is something
All right.
you wish you knew when you realized you wanted to go into media that you wish you knew now?
Just I don't know. I think so. I've loved journalism and wanted to go into journalism since I was probably 4. The museum in DC was my
Yeah.
first like taste of it.
I
Like I
love that.
love
Love
that
that
museum.
place.
Rest in peace to that museum. So just do it. Just practice. Just make things. I wish I made more things in high school. I wish I made more things in middle school.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna regret not making more things in college. Just get reps. Just keep going. I mean, there's not much advice I can give you besides just keep trying, and that would what is what I would tell my younger self. I don't have much beyond that, really.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Jonas.
Of course.